Hello and welcome. My name is Sara Harberson. I'm America's College Counselor. Thank you so much for joining me this evening. This is a Facebook Live rapid fire Q&A. So if you have any questions, if you're a parent, a student, or working with a student, you can ask your question in the comments section below the live feed. I should mention that I'm streaming live on both of my Facebook pages, Sara Harberson and Admissions Revolution. I want to welcome all of you wherever you're coming from, across the country, across the world. You can give me some shout outs. Let me know if you're a parent, a high school student. I see some familiar names already joining our live session. Let me know where you're coming from, what year of high school, and again, if you have any questions about the college admissions process. This is a very busy time for high school seniors especially. Some of you have been admitted to colleges and universities already, and congratulations. Some of you have been deferred and are wondering what that means and what you can do to improve your chances in the regular decision round. Some of you might have been denied and you're wondering what you need to do next. Should you apply to an early decision to school? Should you be adjusting the colleges on your list for regular decision? If you are a high school junior, you might have a lot of questions about PSATs and what they mean in the admissions process, maybe questions about national merit and creating a beginner college list or a startup college list, because January tends to be a busy time when high school juniors begin to visit colleges and universities. For those freshmen, sophomores, I would just encourage you to focus in on those core academic subjects. Those are the most important on your high school transcript. Those core classes are math, English, foreign language, science, and history. Those are the courses that ideally I want you to be taking for all 4 years of high school if possible. My common rule that I tell all the families that I work with is I want them to follow the 5-4 plan, all 5 core classes for all 4 years if possible. But it looks like I can't spend too much time going through all the little tips that I want to give out, because we've already gotten some questions and I'll be giving those tips probably in a lot of the answers that I'll be giving. Here's our first question from Daniela. Hi Sarah, wondering how important it is for a young woman who is a Girl Scout, who does Girl Scouts as an activity on the Common App, to also list the Gold Award project. Would it look bad if she does not do one? All right, so Daniela, you're asking a great question, because there are going to be students that continue with Girl Scouts or Boy Scouts in high school. I can tell you that doing the Gold Award for Girl Scouts is very equivalent to doing the Eagle Scout project for Boy Scouts. It's still highly respected in the college admissions process. So when I'm working with a student who does Girl Scouts or Boy Scouts, I encourage them to try to continue so that they reach that goal. But keep in mind that when you're filling out your application, you're going to be doing it usually August, right before senior year, or early fall of senior year. So ideally, Daniela, you want to make sure that your daughter finishes that Gold Award before they start filling out their application. The same thing goes for those boys who are doing the Eagle Scout project for Boy Scouts. Next question. 4 years of foreign language. Is 2 years of Spanish and then 2 years of French okay? You know, obviously, if it's the only option, colleges are going to work with that. So let's say Spanish got discontinued and the only other language that was available at the high school was French. That could happen. But ideally, I do like students to stick with the same language, again, for all 4 years if possible. That is going to present the best on an application to an admissions committee. It doesn't mean that a student who does that is not going to get into their dream school. I would just say, to put yourself in the best position, I would stick to one foreign language and stick with it all 4 years of high school. There are going to be, however, some students who love languages and end up being what I call a double language student, which is really impressive. They do 2 foreign languages in high school, but they don't drop one. So that double language student is highly valued in the admissions process. Next question. So it just disappeared. All right, next question. If the college asks for 3 years of, another one disappeared. You guys are asking, being asked so quickly. For the next question, history can be combined with social science courses to satisfy recommended credits in history, right? That's right, Paul. And my apologies. The questions are coming in so quickly that they tend to jump and I don't see them. But for Paul, yes, history, social studies, sometimes it's called, social science courses, they're all grouped together. That's one of the core subjects that I want students to take. So common history core classes would be AP US History, or European History, or Ancient History, or AP Government, or even AP Macro and Microeconomics. Those are going to be considered history or social sciences in the eyes of colleges. Next question from Maggie. Can you please elaborate on your Pomona College Walk on Water comments earlier tonight in Application Nation? Okay, so this is an Application Nation, Mom. We just finished our session tonight. This was for the younger grades, class of 2021, 22, and 23. I also have a group of class of 2020 Application Nation families. Someone had asked Maggie, or maybe, I don't know if it was Maggie or another parent had asked about Pomona College. It's a great small liberal arts college, but I said you really do have to walk on water to get admitted to Pomona, even in the early decision round. I should check, Maggie, and I'll put it on the discussion board later tonight. What the acceptance rate at Pomona College was last year, not only overall, but in early decision. I would imagine it is probably very similar to the acceptance rate at an Ivy League institution. The thing about Pomona, it's very small. While their applicant pool is small, it is highly competitive. So what ends up happening is they can be very picky in their admissions process. I would say that the students that I know that have gotten in the past have been highly intellectual. A lot of overlaps, I would say, with Williams, Amherst, Bowdoin, even Claremont McKenna. Claremont McKenna is almost as competitive as Pomona College, but a phenomenal 4-year experience. Next question from Jenna. Hi, my name is Jenna. I got deferred from Ohio State. Is there anything I should be doing? Also, Maryland is my top choice. I've emailed the admissions officer. Jenna, your question just disappeared. So I think I caught most of it. You got deferred from Ohio State. What can you do? So it gets a little tricky with those large public state universities because they have so many applicants and such a huge volume. Their applicant pool is huge. So you want to check, this is what I tell my Application Nation students who get deferred. The first step is look at your decision letter, Jenna. It's going to indicate if that college or university accepts any updates or follow-ups or a possible even a letter expressing your continued interest in the college or university. Usually your decision letter will actually state that. And it will also give you sometimes instructions about how to upload that letter of interest or how to send in extra information like an update. But if they permit you to do that, I would encourage you to sit down after the holidays, once your regular decision schools are in. I would highly encourage you to sit down and write a letter. I tell my students that that letter should be about 3/4 to 1 page at the most, no more, but no less than 3/4 of a page. And it really should be a passionate story about why you want to attend that institution. Some students will go as far as making a declarative statement in that letter to say, if you admit me in regular decision, I will enroll, because a lot of colleges are really concerned about their yield rate. That's the percentage of students who accept the offer of admission. So in regular decision, when they know a student is likely to accept the offer if admitted, sometimes that can be the push that the student needs. Also, your counselor of record, your guidance counselor or your college counselor at your high school can follow up sometimes. It's always a little bit tougher with those large public state universities, but sometimes you will have better luck with your private colleges and private universities. Sometimes the admissions officer will even share with your counselor what you can do to improve or what was the reason why you possibly were deferred. Next question, are you finding that early decision isn't as helpful for admission as it once was? So early decision is a binding program. Not every college offers early decision, but a lot of the private colleges and universities do. A handful of public ones like William & Mary now it offers early decision, and University of Virginia now offers early decision, but you're going to find it at private colleges and universities. It's a binding program. So the student is basically saying, if you admit me, I will come. And because of that, there is an elevated acceptance rate in early decision across the board. No matter what college you are looking at, if they have an early decision program, their acceptance rate in early decision is going to be higher. Sometimes twice, sometimes even 3 times or even higher than what it is in regular decision. Now, this person is asking, this individual is asking, is there real advantages anymore? Some families hear that there are a lot of recruited athletes that come in through early decision, which is true. There are a lot of students that are applying who don't need financial aid because that's a big consideration for families, and some families aren't ready to commit to it. So am I finding that it's not as beneficial? No, I still think there's a clear advantage. The acceptance rate are so different between the early decision round and the regular decision round, but I would say that the student has to start off being competitive. So maybe 10, 20 years ago, if the students' test scores or grades were a little bit lower, they possibly could have gotten in the early decision round. Now I would say because the applicant pool is bigger even in early decision, the student has to be competitive from an objective standpoint first and foremost to have a chance of admission. Next question, if my kids took an accelerated chemistry and biology class in 9th grade, so they got 2 years of science credits in 1 year, they also got high school credit for physics and environmental science in 8th grade, took AP environmental in 10th and AP physics in 11th, can they get away with no science in 12th grade? I guess they could get away with it, but what I will say, Claire, is that most admissions officers, even if they see that the student took high school science class in 8th grade, they're not so focused on what happened before 9th grade. If the student is not planning to be a science major, they might be able to get away with that they took science all the way through but don't want to take it in senior year. But I would say if the student is interested in any STEM field at all, it's going to be important for them to take science senior year. And that goes for any academic interest that the student has. I want to make sure that it's represented, especially if it's a core subject, in senior year especially. Next question, Jenna, Maryland is my top choice. I'm on borderline, but really want to get in. What can I do? So University of Maryland, I believe, has an early action or priority deadline, Jenna. I can't remember which one, but hopefully you applied in that earlier round. That's going to, it doesn't necessarily work like early decision, but there's a lot more room in the class in that earlier round for University of Maryland. Again, it's a very large university. I would be careful reaching out to admissions officers at this stage of the game. Sometimes they get annoyed with students emailing them, even if they give out their email address. They are in crunch mode, they're reading applications, but I would say if it is your first choice and it's not clear from your application already, your guidance counselor, or again, college counselor at your high school could drop an email or even pick up the phone and call the admissions officer who's responsible for your region of the country. All right, next question from Anita. Follow-up question from last month. My daughter earned a 1550 on the SATs. Whoa. 800 on the Math 2 subject test, but only a 680 on physics subject test. She's a multivariable calc and physics C now. Should she submit the physics score to Ivy League schools? Most only recommend, not require 2 subject tests for engineering, but I wonder if it recommends means required at the Ivies. Okay, so this is a great SAT score. 800 on the Math 2. Which is one of those subject tests, if you're looking for one, that's probably one to take, especially if you've got pre-calculus by junior year. You could take the Math 2 in June of junior year, or even if you're advanced beyond that, you could take it June of junior year is always a good time. And any student that's going into business, engineering, any of the sciences, pre-med, taking the Math 2 would be a smart move. Physics is also a really smart move to take as a subject test if you're interested in engineering. However, it is probably the most challenging subject test out there. And so the student really needs to make sure that they are taking the most advanced level physics class that they can take, like AP Physics C, for example, to be able to take the physics subject test. And even then, some students don't do that well on the subject test. So it's important, if you register to take the physics subject test or think you want to take it, take a practice test in advance, because if your practice test scores are not well into that 700 range, you're probably not going to be competitive for an Ivy League institution engineering program or another highly selective engineering program. I would not send the 680. I think it would do more harm than good, even if that institution is saying that they recommend 2 subject tests. I would look into possibly another subject test to do, maybe possibly the chemistry subject test. That could be a possibility. Ultimately, you want to send them your highest scores, SATs, ACTs, and subject tests, if you have that ability to do that. So let's say you ended up getting a 780 on the U.S. history subject test. Even though you might not want to be a history major, That's a really high subject test, and if they're not giving specifics, I would send that along. Next question, saw a comment from an Application Nation parent about keeping pay-to-play programs in double secret hiding. What does that mean? I have a 10th and an 8th grader in Raleigh, North Carolina. Thanks. Yes, okay. So I have many secrets that I share with my Application Nation families, but I also share some with all of you in these Facebook Live sessions. Pay-to-play programs. Be really, really careful. Right now, if you have a high school student, you're probably getting inundated with invitations for them to apply to these programs. They're on college campuses all across the country, and they sound amazing, and they are. But the thing is, they cost a lot of money. I think if you want to send your child to the Harvard summer program, if they're a high school student, it can be up to $12,000, I think, for them to do it. Admissions officers really, especially at the highly selective colleges, they really don't like these pay-to-play programs. Even the admissions officers at the college where the program took place. These are separate admissions processes. So a summer program has their own office, own selection process that is different than the undergraduate admissions office. Be very careful with these pay-to-play programs. A student can do it and they can have an incredible experience. It can help them figure out their academic interests, for example. It can give them a sense of what college is like, or at least living on a college campus in the summertime. But I do not want those students putting them on their applications. I see that we just posted Application Nation. Check it out because it's for families of high school students. We have different groups. So right now we have the senior group is called Application Nation Class of 2020. If you want to see what colleges they've been getting into, follow my Instagram account. Every single day I've been posting on my Instagram story all of our acceptances. So we have over 250 acceptances for the Application Nation Class of 2020 group. We are about to launch our Application Nation Class of 2021 group in January. To be a part of that group, you've got to get on the wait list. So we'll include that link as well. And then we've got a younger group for those families of class of 2022 and 23. So check it out. All right, next question. If the student is planning to be a liberal arts major and looking at their top tier schools, are subject tests really needed? So Sarah, these subject tests, they come out of nowhere, and a lot of families don't even know that they should take them. I would say over the last couple of years, these subject tests are waning in terms of popularity, and that is because people like me put a lot of pressure on colleges and universities because they are putting so much pressure on our kids. Students are already taking the SAT or ACT. A lot of them are taking AP exams or IB exams. So subject tests add a whole extra layer of work and preparation and stress and also money. So look at some of the colleges that your child might be interested in. If they require or recommend subject tests, there aren't a lot of these colleges out there, but they are the more selective colleges. You probably want to start thinking about that now, especially if you have a junior. I would say the best time to take subject tests is June of junior year. Here's the reason. If the student is taking AP exams, those AP exams will take place in May of junior year. They're already in that testing mode or prep mode. Not that the AP exams are just like the subject tests, but it can get them started in terms of preparation. And so a couple weeks later, they can take the subject tests in June. So is it necessary for you to take subject tests? I would say if you're looking at some of those highly selected colleges that at least right now recommend or require them, I would definitely at least have a couple in your back pocket just in case. And not all colleges are going to be in a position where you have to send all of these scores. A lot of times you can pick and choose which scores you send to the colleges. Next question. How do private universities view students who graduate high school early by taking the test, California High School Proficiency Exam for our state, and attend community college in lieu of 11th and 12th grade? I know this can be an advantage for transferring to UC universities if the right community college courses are taken, but I'm unfamiliar with how this works for private colleges. So you're right. So if a student is planning to stay in state for college and attend a state or public university where being in state is an advantage in the admissions process, something like this can be really helpful because the credits the student is earning at that community college can sometimes go towards their undergraduate degree. But here's the tough part. If they're looking at private colleges, especially private colleges and universities outside of their home state, or those highly selective colleges and universities, a lot of times those colleges and universities are not going to give credit for some of those classes. It's not that they don't trust or respect the community college classes, it's that they want the student on their campus for all 4 years from a financial standpoint. So I would just keep in mind that if you're staying in state, that could really work. The same thing goes for students that are taking dual enrollment classes at their high school. If they're planning to stay in state, those dual enrollment classes can help them graduate from high school and actually earn credits towards their college degree. But if they're looking at highly selected colleges, private universities, I would say that those dual enrollment credits are probably not going to get credit for those colleges once they enroll at their ultimate college, I should say. Next question from Paul. What is the mid-year report composed of? How important is it? All right, this is a good one, Paul. So the mid-year report is a form that the counselor of record, so the guidance counselor or the college counselor at your high school, has to fill out almost always for every college or university, whether you got admitted in the early round or you're in the regular decision round or you applied rolling admissions. Almost every college in the country is going to expect this mid-year report. It is a form that the counselor fills out, and there's some basic information. Sometimes the counselor fills everything out, sometimes they don't fill out anything. But the important thing about this mid-year report is they're supposed to attach the grades from first semester of senior year. So that's why it's so important to continue to challenge yourself in terms of your classes senior year and also continue to do well in terms of grades senior year, because that can play a huge role in the admissions process. Most of the time that mid-year report needs to come in by the end of January or the very beginning of February. So check in with your counselor to make sure that first semester grades are available by then. Sometimes they come in a little bit later as well, and that should be okay in the regular decision round. Next question from Scott. What is your opinion of early college programs from state schools? My son participated last year, but he may not go to a state school, so the credits won't count. So he's taken no more. Should I let him take the on-campus summer program just to see what college is like before 12th grade? So early college programs, that term is actually used in several different ways. Sometimes it means that the student actually starts college early. They, instead of finishing senior year, they actually start college, what would have been their senior year. Sometimes the early college program could just be college classes that the student can take at their local university or community college. I would say to a student who is really ambitious and curious, the most important thing is to exhaust the curriculum at your high school first. That's the most important thing. If you're taking college classes and missing out on that, traditional high school experience, sometimes the admissions officer is wondering why that is the case. So I say to students, take the classes at your high school. If you exhaust the curriculum in a particular academic subject, you can always take them at your community college or local university, or possibly even take a class during the summertime. But I would say that those programs aren't necessary to stand out in an applicant pool. Next question, is 740 a good subject test score in physics, biology to send to an Ivy? So here is the thing, and if you're not familiar with my background, I spent 10 years in the undergraduate admissions office at the University of Pennsylvania before I did a lot of other things in college admissions. But I would say that at Penn for subject tests or another similarly highly selective college, make sure that your subject tests ideally are 700 or above. But I would say the most competitive students are probably going to be getting a 750 or above on subject tests. But a 740 is pretty close. I would say if you're going to be a physics major, that 740 might not be one that you submit. But if you're going to be an English major, for example, and get a 740 on the physics subject test, that's super impressive. But I would say anything over a 700 for the subject test is going to put you in the competitive range at a highly selected college, but obviously if it's a 750 or higher, you're actually going to be even more competitive, at least from a testing perspective. Next question from Jennifer. Is there a deadline that schools have to let a student know about merit scholarships? We have received many acceptances with merit listed and others without. Is it true it could be in April? Yes, it's true, Jennifer. There are going to be some colleges and universities that will give the merit scholarship out to the student when the student is accepted. And there are some institutions that do not send out merit scholarships until March. Usually, maybe springtime, possibly, maybe even early April, but that would be pretty late. So it really depends on the institution. If you're not sure, go to their admissions website. They usually will tell you when they notify about acceptances and merit scholarships. If not, you can contact the admissions office and find out for sure. But you're right, most of them are going to come with the student's acceptance letter, but some of these institutions do notify in the regular decision round because they want to see not only the early round students, but the regular decision students as well. A question from Laura. Hi, Sarah. For students in high schools that don't give a GPA bump for honors and AP classes, how many AP classes do you recommend for a student who could qualify for several? Okay, so it's really going to depend on your specific high school and what is offered. So an admissions officer is never going to expect a student to have 1 million AP classes on their transcript if the high school doesn't even offer any of them. So it really depends on what the high school offers. And the admissions officer knows what they offer, probably because they've been reading that high school and those applications from that high school for several years. But a lot of times, even if they're a new admissions officer, they're going to look at what's called the high school profile and look to see what is available to the high school student and see how the student has taken advantage of that. But there can be limits. I worked at a high school as a director of college counseling where they limited the number of advanced level classes that the student took each year. If that's the case, the profile should say that very clearly so that the admissions officer is not expecting it. I would say, let's say, high school sophomore or high school junior, if they're wondering how many AP classes to take, they should look at those seniors who are getting into the more selective colleges and find out how many AP classes they took junior and senior year, even earlier than that. In some cases at the high school, there's almost an expectation that all 5 core classes are APs, especially by senior year. But you want to go by what the high school offers and, frankly, what the most successful high school students are taking at your child's high school. All right, next question. Hi, Cher Bear. How does a college look? We have so many familiar names and faces. It's wonderful. How does a college look at a student who transfers schools in high school, say mid-year? The offerings of honors are less at the new school. The reason for the transfer was unhealthy environment at the old school. All right, so I'm a mom of 3 kids. If my kid is not happy, we're going to try to figure out a way to put them in a better environment, and I think that's what this mom is saying. So if the student transferred from one high school to the next, hopefully the counselor of record is going to be able to contextualize this for the student. You have to be careful, though, on the application from the student's perspective. There's actually a question now on Common App. The student has to list where they're going to be graduating from high school, but also any high schools prior to that. And they provide a open space where the student can explain why the student transferred. I'd be careful. You want to be pretty neutral because it can sometimes throw off the admissions officer if they see something really negative about why the student transferred high schools. So the counselor of record can contextualize that if they had any limitations, like the student didn't take our math curriculum, so they couldn't get into AP calculus by their senior year. That's information that the counselor really should be mentioning in the letter of recommendation. But in terms of going to a high school with fewer advanced level classes, it's going to be clear, hopefully, from the profile that's submitted with the letter of recommendation from the counselor and also the high school transcript. So the admissions officer, again, isn't expecting to see a whole lot of AP classes if the high school has limitations, doesn't have any, or only has a few. And even if the student is coming from or transferring from a high school that had a lot of AP classes, it's possible they could have taken an AP class in sophomore year. But if they're going to a new high school, the curriculum can be very different, and admissions officers understand that. Next question from Dana. Are there any other scholarships beside the National Merit Scholarship you can qualify for with your PSAT score? Gosh, Dana, it's possible, but I would say that most of the scholarships out there. So let me step back. You can get merit scholarships from the colleges and universities specifically. Sometimes they're automatically given to the student just based on their application. Sometimes the student has to submit extra essays or a separate application for the merit scholarship. So those are ones that are given out by the colleges. But there are outside organizations, private companies, private organizations giving out merit scholarships as well. We just did a great video call with our Application Nation groups on this specifically. And, I would just be careful with these scholarship organizations where you provide all this information and you really don't get much back except a lot of junk email. Be careful with it, especially organizations where you have to pay to find out about merit scholarships. But these merit scholarships, there are so many out there, and our expert that we use with Application Nation tells us, think about your specific academic interests, your passions, your strengths, any specific qualities that you have within your background. Sometimes there are specific ones to a cultural group, to an academic interest, to something that the student is interested in. So you can actually search by that way. And I would do the most recent class year to find out what's offered. But these private merit scholarships can be huge. One of our Application Nation students just got a national scholarship, which is a full ride 4-year scholarship wherever that student wants to go. So these are very beneficial to students who are factoring in money, and even some families who aren't. When they get that merit scholarship, it can really help the family out a whole lot. All right, a few more questions if we have them. Next question. My son got his PSAT score back with an index of 221. That means he did really well in the state of Tennessee. We will be notified if he is a national merit. Will he be notified if he is a national merit scholar? Okay, so here's the thing. For all those juniors, you just got back your PSAT scores. Take a look at your score report. Keep in mind that the PSAT scores are not based on the same scale as the SATs. SATs go up to a 1600. For the PSATs, it's only a 1560, I believe. And so that's the highest score that the student can get. And I think that's right, yes. Or is it 1520? 1520 or 1560, but it's not the same scale as the SATs. However, the more important thing is if you're concerned or interested in national merit, is going to be your child's index score, and that parent just referenced it. It's really dependent on that specific year within your state. And you will find out what that threshold is within your state that year to determine if the student is going to be moving forward to be a national merit semifinalist. So what a lot of families do is they hear, okay, my son got a 221, which is a really great index score. That means that their score is really, really high. And they got a 221. They will then look to see what the threshold or the bar was to be a national merit semifinalist the year before or prior years, because that will give them a pretty good sense. It won't be exact because it can change from year to year. But students will not find out if they're a national merit semifinalist until about the first week of September of senior year. National merit scholars are incredible, but it doesn't necessarily impact the admissions process as much as you would think. So if you are a national merit semifinalist, you can list it as an honor on your application if you want, but it's not necessary, especially if you're applying to highly selected colleges, because most of them don't sponsor the National Merit Scholarship, and a lot of students fall into that boat. But you won't find out if you actually get the scholarship until after you've been admitted to college. It will surely help if the college you're going to is a sponsor, but it doesn't directly affect whether or not you're actually going to be admitted. All right, let me see if I can fit in another question. I work for a university. Does listing that on my Students Common App hurt my child's admissions chances at admission to peer group universities? Great question. Okay, so Kathleen, here's the thing. When I worked at Penn, I was the faculty staff liaison within the admissions office, which meant that I read every application from a child of a faculty or staff member. I can tell you that if your child ends up applying to the college where you work at, it can actually be a huge advantage, not just in the admissions process, but in terms of tuition benefit as well. Also look to see, you probably have a tuition exchange program. So even if your child doesn't want to go to the college where you work, there's probably a list of colleges where the tuition benefit can be transferred to a set of colleges. Will that hurt the student's chances in the admissions process if you work at one college and they're applying to others? No, not at all. I think most of the time, there's almost an assumption that the student doesn't want to stay local, especially not go to the college where their parent works. But there are going to be a small group of students who fit that mold and see the benefits of it. I'm thinking of one of our Application Nation students. I know for a fact that the parent works at a highly selective university, and the student chose not to apply early there, chose to apply somewhere else, and the student got in somewhere else, and it's also a highly selective university, so it's never going to be a disadvantage. Next question, do college admissions officers compare all applicants coming from the same high school to each other and possibly limit how many students from each high school they take, speaking in terms of highly regarded state schools? These are great questions. Okay, so here's the thing. So yes, admissions officers are looking at your application, the student's application, and they're looking at it in the context, first and foremost, of the high school where you're coming from. They're going to see, let's say if you apply in the early action round or early decision round, they're going to be looking to see what other students from your class at your high school also apply. They're going to be comparing the classes that you're taking. So if you're taking a more advanced curriculum than another student, that can actually help you in the admissions process. But yes, they are comparing students within a high school group. They also sometimes will look back from previous years to get a feel for what they did. How many students did they admit in the early round or regular round? It doesn't dictate the decisions of the current admission cycle, but sometimes it can be helpful. But the fact is that colleges and universities really aren't supposed to have any quotas, whether it's a racial quota or a quota by high school. But the fact is that, a lot of colleges and universities tend to be fairly consistent from year to year. So look at your Naviance or SCORE. These are application platforms that are used. Look at those platforms if your high school offers them, because you can compare your GPA, your test scores, and look at what students from your high school with similar scores and grades, how they fared with the colleges that you're interested in. And on that note, I think we have to end. I want to thank you all for showing up tonight. I really appreciate it. I hope you got some good information, some questions answered. I want to wish all of you Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Kwanzaa, Happy New Year. I will see all of you for my January Facebook Live session next month. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.